Next item on the agenda is discussion regarding the youth center and remaining facility needs. Manager Francis.
Thank you. So at the last board meeting, the board had requested that staff reach out to Williams Architect, who completed a significant amount of work related to our facility study analysis and started a discussion back in 2018 of what we could potentially do on village properties to address the facility needs. And based on the feedback from the board, both myself and President Pollack met with Mark Bushhouse from Williams Architects to discuss conceptually creating a proposal on behalf of the village for what the board would see as next steps. As part of that discussion, it appeared that Williams Architects does need a little bit more guidance as it relates to scope. And so that is why Mark is here this evening to kind of walk the current board through some of these pieces so that we can provide narrow focus so that they can create a solid proposal for the village that hopefully then the board can approve at the next meeting. So I will actually turn it over to Mr. Bushhouse and allow him to provide his presentation and answer questions of the board.
Can just hit that button. Should be able to. Well, I think so. If not, just tell me. I can switch the slide.
Good evening. Thanks for having me back. It's been a while. Good to see you all and be back here. Yes, good meeting on Monday, and I was able to listen to your last board meeting. Good, thorough discussion, and learned a lot from hearing that. So this evening, the idea here is to, am I hitting buttons?
I hit it for you.
Oh, okay. You want me to move along. All right. Review very briefly the work that was done back in 2018 for anyone who isn't up to speed. I expect most of you have read that, so I'm going to move through it at a very high level on that. And then with that understanding, talk a little bit, go through a little bit some ideas we're having met with your president and your manager and talk through what we're hearing some of the goals could be. So this is the previous study, and at that time, these were the goals. Look at the buildings, see what kind of condition they're in, what is historic, understand redevelopment guidelines, do a lot of space programming with all your staff, looking at growth and change in the village to determine what spaces you need for all your functions. Then we explored a bunch of ideas to remodel, expand, or replace various aspects of the facility. And I just did volume. That didn't do me any good. All right, thank you. So this is, obviously what shows what you have. So obviously this is the main town hall we're in. Some additions that were done in the 50s and 2000 for police and fire. It's called the youth building. We kind of tend to call it the buildings along the river because there's a whole bunch of them. At different ages, obviously the river, the pedestrian bridge over the library. So that's what we have to start with. So next. And then of course we also looked at the fire station number 2 next to the water tank. We even did a quick look at the water tower itself. Next. So what did we do? We looked at the buildings, and quite frankly with our engineers and ourselves, as we looked at the buildings along the river, our quick conclusion was don't save them. Now we can talk further about that, but having done dozens of these over 30 years, you pretty well get a pretty good idea, and you walk around and look at a place like that and imagine what that community really wants to turn this into. Is this going to be an economical ability to do that? Are you going to end up with a facility that meets your long-term goals? Again, every community is different. Every outcome is a bit different, but there are patterns, and the pattern for this would be probably not. But again, always worth looking at to make sure you know what you're doing. And then space needs, as you know, there are significant space needs problems for your fire, police, and just terrible layout. There are security issues, safety issues, we all in the report, very, very real things that need to be dealt with there. And of course, some of your systems aren't very good, and as we all know, parking is constrained around here, and no different here for this main facility. Next. So But again, overall, driving behind the scenes here, population pretty stable. Staffing expects to be stable. All your building areas, including, you know, the village hall, the buildings along the river, the added fire police, all those add up to a little over 32,700. At that time, we did the programming, you needed 52. You had about 48 parking spaces available. You really need about 62 to handle a visitor, for all your staff. And then even then, you still need a few more for your daytime visitors of 6 to 12. So parking's a real issue here for the site. It really does not support itself at the present time. We did a couple quick 3D renderings of the existing facility just so, you know, folks can know what we're looking at. Obviously the bridge over the river, the buildings along the river, the existing building, the addition. There is some parking and drives around, and there's even some parking underneath the building. Next. So we did a couple of concepts. One was a bit smaller, one was a little larger. They really were at that time repurposing the township hall, the village hall, and again, things that are off the table now. But then they were looking at demolishing the police and fire addition and making significant changes there, build your new police and fire, do some links to make things work together. And we did look at adding additional surface parking to the east of the town municipal campus here on that wonderful little green space that, well, it's beautiful, sorry. But then we only got one more parking space, so we're really not solving that problem. Next. This is the layout of it. I don't want to spend much time on it, but again, that's a little less time. Am I doing something?
Sorry.
The parking spaces were put in here. We redid the apparatus room for the fire truck so they could actually have the proper distance to pull out, not be on a sidewalk immediately before they turn on the roads and go to the various calls. Still gave ourselves a parking lot for visitors. Again, at that time, we were looking at remodeling village hall zones. But then next to the fire, we put in a police zone and some connecting lobbies and parking spaces for staff and patrol. Next. And quickly we did the upstairs, had more fire, more police, trying to solve all these connections with some stairs and elevators that would connect to each other. And then you put a bit of a roof over where patrol parking so they weren't all iced up in the wintertime. And then basement, putting some more police and storage units down there. Again, township kept their basement, and we didn't do anything under the fire station. So that was an idea developed then. Next. And then we did a couple quick 3D views of that. Again, just massing diagrams, nothing to look at, but you can kind of see how the size and scale of these buildings, where the apparatus goes, where police was situated. Next. From the Riverside, we really weren't improving the riverfront. These buildings were just being repurposed and reused and rebuilt. We weren't really looking at in a path along here. Here's covered parking for patrol, and you get a sense of the kind of massive building that would be required to make that concept happen. Next. The next one was basically do that, but now get a little more aggressive on replacing things, really try to enhance the riverfront, give ourselves some opportunity for citizens to view and access the river. And this time we're really going to try to increase the parking spaces significantly so we really do meet the parking needs for staff on a day-to-day basis. Next. So in the plan here, we still did the parking lot off of Riverside, but now this whole lot slopes down all the way across to this point when you're a full level below grade. So you'll see on a different side, we did some parking underground. And by doing that, now we have more staff spaces, a little bit better visitor configuration, and fire pushed a little closer, but still working okay with the streets. Again, police next to it. And then at that time, we were looking at renovating Village Hall. Next. And then so here you see upstairs, now we've put living quarters and admin for fire over the apparatus bays, a bigger, better rectangle for police to use, the connecting link to make all these things talk to each other and get around. And now here we're covering the parking area for staff and putting a green area that can overlook the river. We even talked about maybe part of this could be built out with some community spaces, but at this time at least it would have an overlook and would connect to a path now that would go along the river that we would add that would connect to the bridge over the river. Next. So down below here, this is that parking lot from the east, full 20 spaces underground. At the time, we were looking at detention center and evidence. They work well below grade. Putting some storage down there. Again, township keeps theirs. But that was really kind of a key element in solving the parking, and this is a great place for patrol cars to park out of the weather, safe and secure, and they can go off to their calls and in and out without heading out the main visitor areas, which is a bit preferable for them. It also keeps them away from fire truck movements in and out of the building. So there were some real improvements on just vehicle access in general. Next. We did the same blocking diagrams back then, but in the meantime, our firm had need of a cool-looking riverfront facility. So we remembered what we had done for you, and we put in some time on our own dime here and jazzed them up a little bit for another project. So now you can see, if we followed the kind of design cues of the existing Village Hall, Town Hall, and did the fire station with living quarters above, a fire tower, some good training, a police zone, connecting links. Next. Little different angle here from the street, but you get a feel for how we're adding on and changing things. Next. Then on the Riverside, again, you can see the parking lot going down. This is just the beginning of the bridge going over. We could have a sidewalk over top, maybe not, but now you see the pathway along the river beginning to happen, and it works up to the deck area over parking. Next. So here's kind of a nice thing of, yes, you could do a pretty nice upper level deck overlooking the water. This is really used up by fire and police, so if you wanted to build some more here, you could do that for community spaces, but here at least you really created quite the zone that overlooked the river and had let the citizens really enjoy the beauty of the riverfront. So some things we developed. You're welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yes. So what do we do now? Right. So based on conversations we have, understanding some changes that have happened, what we would want to do is go back and revisit the space program. A lot of good work's been done there. This would be a much shorter process this time, much less detailed. What we want to do is go and revise it based on what the situation we're in now. We're going to take out the Village Hall and Recreation space needs because those have been resolved with some other buildings and changes you've made. Understanding you may decide to close down Fire Station 2 and consolidate their services into Station 1 now that you have some mutual aid with adjacent fire departments and districts. So we would need to take that into account. Any changes to police space needs, again, there are some conversations about some zones and parts of that may not be needed now based on sharing of services and facilities with other communities. And again, in the last 5-6 years, there have been ongoing small changes in police facility design and appointments. And then also, probably the most interesting next line is to review, select, and add spaces for community-focused areas. That's where we would need some input here from the village as to what are the priorities and thoughts of what these spaces might mean. Community rooms, kitchen, food services, outdoor spaces, meeting rooms, even in any athletics you'd want to incorporate. But those are the kinds of things we would need some feedback, maybe through staff that would advise us on some of the priority items that could be looked at for community-focused uses. With that, we would now have a new space program that tells us the spaces we need. Compared to those zones of the buildings that are there now, look at the site again, and then investigate the options. So we're going to look at basically two approaches, at least that's our suggestion. One is focus more on additions and remodelings to what you have. Can we reuse things? What can we end up with if we do that? How well can it function? Can it fit? What are the additions and changes we're going to have? Focus first on police and fire. To make sure we take care of them, and then add on the layer of these community-focused spaces. What does that add to it? What does that do to the concepts to add those additional spaces into it? The other approach is be willing to demolish some buildings, the buildings along the river, and even the police and fire additions on this building that were also, in the last study, we realized they weren't considered historic, or at least they're not registered now. So we can look at more new things. And then again, after we've taken care of police and fire, again, add the layer back of community spaces. And now we have those bunch of ideas. We bring in some cost estimating people, really look at the budgets for all those options, price them out. And now we've got a series of possibilities, and we have the numbers that go with them to then evaluate what could happen. Next slide. So, and also with that, conversations we had are understanding there are real financial constraints in this whole process. So let's look at the potential for some phasing. If we do some phasing and do fire and police first, and then maybe add the community spaces later, can we do that What could that do to spreading out the costs, and where do we end up if we do that? Next, based on how that's beginning to work out, let's just look at a whole overall project schedule. How does this thing work? How do you build it? How do you remodel it? And when do you need money? And then as that is happening, we're really hoping the village will be looking at its funding opportunities and possibilities for the project to see how these two can really mesh together and make something work. As part of this, understanding this community's strong commitment to engaging your public and make sure they know what's going on as best as you can, we would say one of the things we could offer is assist you in a public engagement process. There are ways to do that. We've held open houses. We've assisted in finding companies that do statistically valid surveys if that's something you want. We certainly can do help you with some online. People can put in comments, they can vote. So if there's a process there that you'd like us to involve ourselves with you and help you in this, we can do that and put in some specific events and time and hours to make that happen. Also, as you can see, we could develop some exterior design options. What we did on our own dime, it was trying to pick up cues on what you already had. But if you wanted to, before you go to the community and really present the project, our suggestion would be, hopefully you've narrowed it down to basically a basic approach. It's new, or it's remodeled, and this is kind of the way we want to go. Then with that, if you'd like us to develop some more designed approaches other than just blocking diagrams, we could do that for you. Finally, all that could come together into a final notebook. Again, I say notebook, it could be electronic any way you want it to be. That could be posted online as well. And with that, it would have an executive summary that would understand where the village wants to go with this project. The funding plan could be at least referred to in there or also available. And then finally, having done these projects enough times, if you end up wanting or needing to go to a referendum, again, those are services we could assist with. We've done that many times with many municipalities for projects to, again, putting information together, having open houses, so forth, that you have all the data you need to inform the public. So those are some things that we could put in the proposal. Some of the things we could wait on and not really talk about yet. The last one, pre-referendum, we can just be quiet on that and just see where this goes and what you want to do and not really propose anything yet till we see what we need. If you want like a line item in the proposal that says, if we get it down to one idea and you have us develop some concepts sort of on the level of what you saw, we could put a cost to that if that's something you'd like to have available. And if you want a public engagement process, we could work with staff a bit and try to outline some steps that would make sense for us to include, and we could put a cost to that as well as an item for the board to look at, review, and choose. The ones above that, I'm suggesting those might be a group of services that you pretty much need to get to the point where you're ready to see what you have and help you make some decisions on which way we want to go with this thing. So there you are.
Thank you, Mark. So I guess our goal this evening is, if the board is ready, is to see if we can get to where we direct staff to work with Mr. Bushhouse and Williams Architects on a contract proposal that would then come back to this board for approval. So if you do that tonight, you're not making any commitments, or just saying that you want to see the details of what they'll do and the cost of doing it. So with that, any questions or discussion, comments by trustees?
Well, hi. Thank you for coming and for the summary and presentation. I am very interested in the idea of phasing this project and predicating it all on the demolition of the existing structures besides Township Hall, obviously, that are on site. I think you are correct that starting from scratch with something that is energy efficient and meets our needs is going to be very, very important. I feel, and based on a lot of the survey responses that we've received, not only through this recent board survey, but also through work that we've been doing with the C4, that the community has a strong desire to have, some active use space that faces and fronts the river. So my preference would be for, in phasing the project, that we address the public safety and administration building as phase one, but orient that towards the street and reserve as much space as possible along the river for the development of the future community site. Under the community center, I don't really have a good sense for how much space different uses and options require or necessitate. So I would like to see two options developed, potentially. One being a multi-use community center that includes flexible places for gathering and, emphasizes that different rooms that are available for dining, small concerts, exercise rooms, et cetera, with square footage to accommodate lockers, showers, those kinds of things, rentable office spaces and workspaces, plus all of the mechanicals. And, you have the expertise to factor those in, the elevators, the stairs, whatever. I'm sure there are requirements that your staff would be more than capable of working in. Second, however, there has been some interest in having basketball courts and gyms. So I would be very, very curious to see if that option were incorporated as an alternate for the community space, what that would do, or whether there's even room for that. I think I would be curious as to whether cantilevering a portion of the police and fire building over existing parking and building up from there, so it's not just a straight flat surface lot, but if you could maximize the use of space by doing something like that, I think we need to be extremely creative and have as minimal footprint as possible for the police, fire, and safety that also accommodates all of their fire trucks and, and needs. So I know I'm asking a lot, but I'd like to see that kind of phased approach with two different options presented for the community center side.
Manager Francis.
So if I may, and Mark can correct me, so that's really good information, but I think that's gonna be part of one of the phases that was outlined of getting the different feedback of what the board wants to see as part of the design. So the first piece would be new assessment, the next piece would be community, board feedback and potentially community feedback on the facilities. Phasing sounds like it's definitely on the table, so that should be included as part of the proposal. And so I guess of these remaining items, would the board, is the consensus, you want a public engagement process for Williams to embark upon as part of this proposal?
I do, yes.
Or are we asking, do we want to know how much that costs, or?
Well, they'll provide it as part of their proposal, so just so that Mark and his team know what to incorporate, then for the board's discussion at the next meeting.
So we want to ask the public what they should incorporate?
So that'll be part of the process, right? So that what they're designing, ultimately, they'll do a refresh on the facility assessment, but when we're talking about community space, what is that? Because, they have to figure out what to put where, the different boxes and square footage and things of that sort.
Now, if we want to look at the gymnasium in larger, larger facility here, we would probably recommend doing some outreach and probably some kind of survey saying, here are some features we could put in here, and, they will cost money, and therefore, how high of a priority do you put on these items being in there, knowing that the village will have to, fund these with tax dollars, and try to get, very specific feedback to get a sense from that kind of a survey that says, 42% support this feature, 68% before, support those features. If that's something you want from the community, we would be inclined to say that's the kind of survey that would give very more clear direction on what the citizens want. I will also say many communities, their elected officials say, that's kind of why we're here. So let us talk about it and think about it, maybe talk to some people we know. And, you don't need to do this statistically valid survey. We can give you direction on what options you want. We want you to review and include in your space programming. So, there are different approaches.
But this could be a line item
Right,
that we
yes,
look at in your
right,
proposal and
that's it.
say, now that we know how much this costs,
Yeah.
maybe we just take this approach and do that in-house,
Right.
or whatever.
Yeah, we can.
We all have a menu
Yes,
to choose from.
menus are healthy.
I do like
I
menus.
like menus.
Manager Francis.
Thank you. Just so that the board know, or is aware, Barry Dunn does and will be working with Williams directly. And so that is the group that we have hired to handle the survey for Parks and Rec, the plan. And so we'll be getting a lot of that data that can be incorporated as part of this process, which will be great because obviously, we received a lot of meaningful feedback from the most recent survey, more specifically about Parks and Rec, that we're going to provide to Barry Dunn, and they will use that as a springboard for their different surveys. And so it'll be nice for Barry Dunn to work in tandem with Williams on some of that feedback as well throughout this process. So then you're not paying for duplicate services too.
I think that community engagement is always important, but we could start at a place where a vision is presented. So I love Trustee Marshazga's vision, and sometimes when you ask the community, just blank, start from zero, you don't always get as much feedback as you want.
Those are, surveys are conducted at different points. Sometimes they are very early on just to see if there's a strong support for doing something. Other times, the elected officials have a pretty good idea of what kind of, the general support that is out there, and then they want to get more specific. So then in that case, they may work to create the vision with options, and then put that vision out there with those options and ask people specific questions about do they support various aspects of the vision. So either can work. Since you've got a surveying people already assisting you, that's very helpful.
Any other comments, questions from trustees?
In your meeting, did you discuss the possibility of 3 floors? Is that on the table?
Yeah, we discussed multiple floors. I think I even heard 4 once, but let's just say we don't have a preconceived notion of levels. One of the things we may ask you to get going on soon is some soil borings to find out if we want to do some underground parking or other basement levels. Is the river and water tables going to be cooperative, or is that going to be a battle? So, yeah.
So, of course, police and fire, that could be one chunk. That could hold the bunks, the showers, possibly training. And then the other chunk, as we're envisioning it, it's not just community space. We're going to have the meeting rooms. Riverside TV will have a studio. Will there be other staff offices required in that area or wished for some expansion?
As it currently stands, we've been really creative for admin, finance, and community development of reworking our spaces, right? So, and it's nice that we're all in the same space. It's not great that we have office spaces in the basement, but we've got great staff and we make it work. So if the board's directive was, that space that's directly on the river, that you all want it to be for residents and the public, we will figure out other ways to accommodate our own spaces within our current footprint. Really, the priority for myself is public safety, so police, fire, and RTV. It makes all the sense in the world that wherever their studio is, it's right off of the multi-purpose room that can be utilized as a board meeting, a public space that also can be repurposed for training space, etc. So I think there's a lot of different opportunities to kind of make those different pieces work. But I think overall staff, while it would be nice to have additional offices, we can certainly make other things work. Worst case scenario, if for some reason we completely ran out of space over here, we could look to utilize a conference room space in that new area, and then convert our conference room to a staff space or an office.
And picking up on Manager Francis' idea here, if we did build a new, nice, large meeting space that could do all the functions that she talked about, and one of them being handling the board meetings, you know, the room we're in right now is in a good location to support additional office or conference room needs for, she says, no, I guess I'm done here, okay,
It's not a room.
okay,
Thank you.
never mind.
So is there consensus then to ask for a contract proposal?
Yes.
I'm here, yes.
Okay. Any other questions or comments on this? Do you need any further direction?
So I will work with Mark, but what I envision is it'll be broken down into phases with the different prices, and we'll engage in each individual phase. So then the board has an option to say, no, we're gonna opt out of this particular phase, but we wanna move on to phase 3 and not do phase 2. Some of it may be we have to kind of move through the phases to get to the finish line either, as well. But I would assume that once the facility update is done, we're gonna work in different meetings so that Mark is touching in with not just staff, but also providing the village board an update on his findings from the facility, where we're at, and kind of what he needs to continue down this path.
Very good. Thanks for coming to our meeting tonight.
Very happy to.
Mark,
Thank you.
appreciate it.